Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Tonight on the program, we focus on the deepening concerns over a resurgence of Boko Haram attacks in Borno State. Governor Babagana Zulum has issued a stern warning that hard-fought gains in the fight against insurgents are being reversed. He cited recent deadly attacks on military formations and rising abductions, questioning the sustainability of the current security strategies, despite his administration's significant support to the armed forces. But the federal government sharply disagrees. While the defense headquarters insists its operations are yielding results, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Muhammad Idris, says the Tinubu administration remains fully committed to eradicating terrorism, pointing to sustained synergy among security agencies and recent investment in military hardware as evidence that the tide is turning. So, who is right, and what does this contradiction between Abuja and Maiduguri signal about the war on terror? Joining me tonight to help us dissect the unfolding situation will be a retired Brigadier General of the Nigerian Army, retired General Sani Usman, who was one time a former spokesperson of the Nigerian Army. But before we get into the details, let's head over to Maiduguri for this report put together by Hawa Adamu.
It seems we are losing ground.
Borno State is once again on edge as Governor Babagana Zulum raises alarm over the renewed and sustained attacks by Boko Haram insurgents. In a high-level security meeting with traditional leaders and top security officials in Maiduguri, Governor Zulum said the scale and frequency of attacks, with little to no counter-offensive, are signs that the state is beginning to lose ground. The governor described recent attacks that dislodged military formations in Damboa, Gamburu, Ngala, and Goza local governments as alarming and a serious setback to security gains. Zulum lamented that 3 local governments, Marti, Abadam, and Guzamala, remains under the control of Boko Haram insurgents, hampering resettlement and development efforts. While appreciating the efforts of security agencies in the ongoing fight against insurgents, he appealed to the federal government to scale up its intervention and prioritize the reconstruction of critical federal roads, including the Biu Damboa Maiduguri, Maiduguri Dikwa Ngala, and Maiduguri Kukawa Biu Damaturu roads.
In recent times, Borno State in general has been witnessing sporadic attacks within the general area of the state. Many military formations were dislodged, especially in Wulgo, in Sabongari, in Wajiroko, amongst others. It seems we are losing ground. This is the main reason why we are here. We want to appeal to the federal government also to ensure that the northeastern part of Nigeria received the desired attention. It seems the focus of the Nigerian Army and the focus of the Federal Ministry of Defense is not in the northeastern state of Nigeria. Considering the strategic location of the northeastern state of Nigeria,
it could be recalled that suspected Boko Haram insurgents attacked Izgi village in Goza local government area on Sunday, killing several soldiers and losing many of their own fighters in a fierce clash. Daily Trust gathered that the attack occurred around 1 a.m. when the terrorists outran the military base stationed in the community. In a separate incident, reported by security tracker Zagazola Makama, a police inspector was killed during an ambush by Boko Haram insurgents at the Police Mobile Force Training College Camp, Limankara in Goza. 2 weeks earlier, similar attacks were launched on military formations in Wajirko and Wulgo communities within Dambao and Gamborungala local government areas, respectively, underscoring the increasing frequency and scale of attacks.
Council expressed concern at the rising cases of insurgency attacks in Borno State. Council note that recently the Boko Haram insurgents have carried out daring attacks on our military installations and critical infrastructure, and even dislodged some of these facilities. This is worrisome and is disturbing. Council called on the federal government of Nigeria and armed forces of Nigeria to continue to support the ongoing efforts in counterinsurgency operations.
The fight against insurgency and the loss of lives is ongoing, with over 2 decades of destruction, displacement, and instability leaving millions in humanitarian distress.
All right. Awadam, they're capturing the recent developments in Borno State. And of course, we're just going to take a quick look at what has been a busy first quarter 2025 for the security forces, looking at some of the attacks by Boko Haram insurgents, where that resurgence continues to raise concerns within and outside the state capital, especially those flashpoints, the Damboa axis, the Gamborungala axis, as well as all the other hotspots where the governor is re-echoing that concern about the difficulty in trying to relocate people who have been displaced back to their host communities as a result of some of these security concerns that continue to generate a lot of concern. Several attacks in January, in fact, multiple attacks. The 40 farmers, you can remember, were killed in Dumba region by suspected Boko Haram terrorists on January 13 and January 24th. Another attack by Boko Haram escalated in the Christian communities of Chibok, displacing some 4,000 people. Well, we're going to just take a quick break. When we come back, Brigadier General Sani Usman Kukashika, retired, is going to join the conversation as we take a look at what this recent concern is signposting for the fight against terrorism, especially in northeast Nigeria. Join us after the break. Welcome back to the program. Thank you most kindly for staying with us. Let's get the conversation started. Brigadier General Sani Usman Kukashika, former spokesperson of the Nigerian Army, is joining us for this conversation as we navigate the concerns arising from Borno State, raised by the Chief Security Officer of the state around the security strategy and how it looks like the gains made by the security forces are being reversed in light of the recent developments in the state. Brigadier General, as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much.
Right. Let me just get your initial reaction to Professor Babagana Zulum's concerns when he talks about losing ground to the Boko Haram insurgency.
I think he has every right to be concerned, being the governor and the chief security officer of that state, simply because anybody, and remember, the governor, he was commissioner for reconstruction rehabilitation, so he knows the problem, and he understood to what extent, you know, the security forces have made tremendous progress and all the rest of the thing. And having about 3 years semblance of relatively peace in Borno State, particularly still Maiduguri and all the rest. And sometimes we often used to say that you feel safer in Maiduguri than in Abuja, and it's quite true. And now you have these isolated incidents in as Damboa local government, Gambarungala and Goza. It becomes worrisome and concerned. But be it as it may, you have to put it into proper context to understand. You know, these attacks happened in the fringes of the, deployment of the military. But that notwithstanding, it's more or less like a wake-up call. More so now that the insurgents have devised other means or tactics as compared to the previous instances you talk about, rudimentary attacks, use of IED and what have you. Now they resort to use of technology. So there is every reason for not just the state governor to be concerned, and of course even themselves those who are fully engaged in the counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency effort. Notably, the security forces are not resting on their oars, and they are taking into cognizance these issues. But of course, it is not just them. There are other components that really needs to assist them in dealing with these issues. Take, for instance, now, how do they come about the use of drones, not just for surveillance, but even armed drones? And now that some foreigners have been arrested, how do they come into play? And they are not just fighters, they are also, armed merchants and what have you. And most importantly, some of them, they are not even part of the African, they did not come from within the African continents. So this has, called for a lot of concern. So what is wrong? Do they come through the porous borders, or they flew in, into the country by air? So what happened to our, security and all the rest? So it is not just Borno State, so to speak. It's more or less like a wake-up call. The component that are supposed to be doing other things in dealing with this insurgency have to also up their game.
So would you say it's fair to characterize recent developments as a resurgence?
No, I don't think so, because when you look at it, you just have to look at it where you are coming from. Even within the last 5-10 years or thereabout, within the last 3 years, there were no such noted things, but these 3 incidences were more or less like isolated. Of course, somebody who is used to, relative peace, suddenly there is a jolt. You can use all the terms to describe it, but I don't think if you may call it resurgence, because you look at the massive landmass of Borno State and where these instances have happened. So it's more or less like isolated instances, and this to a large extent should call for concern by all and sundry, right? So, but you don't have to call it resurgence, because if you look at it from that perspective, there were instances you dare not even mention the word Boko Haram inside the city of Maiduguri or elsewhere, or talk less of mentioning Abubakar Shekau and all the rest. A lot of people have paid dearly with their lives and all the rest of the thing. And I just told you that you felt safer in Maiduguri than in Abuja. So it's more or less like isolated incident, but you cannot call it resurgence, so to speak. But naturally, people should also look at the fact that these terrorists, they are very resilient.
Right.
And if you go back to 2016, they, form an alliance with the international terror group, the ISIS in Maghreb and all the rest of the thing. They must remain relevant. And it, so they will try every means possible. And now, apart from that, you have to look at also what is happening within the West African sub-region and, of course, the Sahel region. You know that all is not well, because we have had instances of, conflicts here and there, proliferations of arms and armed groups and violent extremists and what have you. So these are issues that we have to look at also, as against, looking at it from the narrow prism. So the issue of geopolitics also come into play. So I think it should be of concern.
Yeah, I guess we get to talk about the position of the multinational joint task force in addressing some of these regional concerns that you're addressing. But you hear what the Minister of Information is saying about the comments of the governor, basically just countering him. And you consider that the state government and the federal government are seemingly at odds in the public space. What risk does this pose? I mean, obviously, over the security assessment issue, they see it the state government sees it this way and the federal government sees it in a different way. What risk does this pose, if any, to coordination and the counter-insurgency efforts in Borno, for instance?
I think I made reference to the fact that you don't fight insurgency or terrorism with a divided house, not just insurgency, any security challenge. So, and I have followed things the way they are, and I've seen instances, or even the state governor was calling on the federal government to, assist the military further. I have made reference to the issue of the use of technology and what have you. So invariably, invariably, the issue is that of a collective responsibility. Okay, so both of them ought to look at things from the perspective, and I'm so happy and commendably so that this kind of constructive engagement with the components of Borno State, not just the security agencies. You have seen traditional rulers and well-meaning sons and daughters of Borno State, including the youth group. They were all involved in this kind of thing. And I was saying, look, there should have been more of this. We don't have to wait to when. So with this kind of, it will come up with a solution to see what is it that Borno State should do. What is it that the military or the armed forces should do, and security agencies? What is it? What is the level of support the components of Borno will support? Because invariably, in this counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism efforts, the kinetic aspect, which is the military or the security aspect, or armed forces, whatever term you would like to use, is more or less insignificant compared to other aspects that need to be done. There are instances of Borno initiative and all the rest. What are the level of support from the Nigerian society and other components of that need to support them? These are the issues that we should be talking about. And if you are going to talk about that, of course, once in a while, the Security Council of that states, meet, and they tend to, interrogate certain issues. And even the military, as it were, in any situation, there is always an after-action review. And I made reference to the fact that right from the Defense Headquarters, Services Headquarters, there are cells that deal with lesson learned in all these things. I think the most important thing is to look at what brought about these attacks and how best can we mitigate them, given the various components that are involved in the counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism effort. We look at the technology. What is the role of the government? What is the role of the society? But to a large extent, government has tremendous role to play. We talk about engaging the youth. What makes it so attractive now that the youth are trying to, hobnob with this terrorist group? Why is it that some people are still giving them information or logistical support? And what is it that the federal government need to do to support this counter-insurgency effort, especially given the fact that they have upped the game using technology, drones and what have you? Then, of course, what is the role of other supporting elements, the intelligence community? And you talk about other component of the security architecture. How comes we have these foreign fighters or armed merchants? And to a large extent, we tend to neglect the fact that there is always a war economy system that revolves around any complex situation. There are people that are benefiting, be it locally or internationally. More so now we have more vested interest as compared to what we have. The alliances with the ISIS and of course the kind of things that are happening. The Western powers are trying to covet, resources in the West Africa. Look at what is happening in our neighboring countries with the multinational joint task force. People are trying to see how best they can be friends to either Nigeria, to Niger, to Cameroon, Chad, and the rest of them. So these are the issues that we have to look in understanding the circumstances that brought about these issues. Yeah. But the good thing about it is that all hope is not lost. I think the whole idea is to sit down and talk and engage those in the field and understand what are those constraints. Why is it that they are having this kind of things? And more so, if you look at it, they are well experienced. Some of them, particularly the commanders, some of them, they have been in the theater, they have been commanding officers, they have been brigade commanders, now they are general officers command. So they have the understanding of the terrain or the issue at hand and their fingertips. So possibly they are under constraint. So occasion of this nature, talking about issues, I think is a good thing, right, so that we can understand the problem and see how best we can mitigate it.
Okay. There's something to be said about the perceived in denial of not just the federal government, but the defense headquarters also in response to what the governor said. I mean, clearly because it's coming from the governor of Borno State, it has some weight in terms of the argument he was making, where the defense headquarters is saying, listen, we have recorded X amount of gains and we are still recording more going forward. Do you think that this perceived back and forth doesn't help, especially with regards to the morale of our men and women of the Nigerian armed forces who are battling the insurgents day in, day out?
I don't think so, in the sense that I think the various commanders have a fair understanding of what is going on. And this is not the first time such things have been happening. I think it's more or less like communication gap, and I can rest assure you, wait for this. In the next coming 2 or 3 days, these issues will be put behind. But the most important thing, you will see a renewed vigor in respect of the counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism effort. It's not quite long when the services chiefs were there, especially the first period, so they understand some of these issues at hand. And sometimes the response time take a while, especially this logistical support and what have you. But I can rest assure you, this is inconsequential. People are just blowing things out of proportion. And even when I was in the service, we have had instances like that, you know, bent up emotions and what have you. But in reality, this is not exactly the way it is, and you have to put it in the proper perspective. So, but the most important thing, I can rest assure you, things will get better, and Nigerians will be better off for it. And Borno, not just Borno, the northeastern Nigeria will be more secured.
Okay. There's always this concern about Nigeria's military stretched too thin. We have so many theaters of operation across the 36 states of the Federation, most recently deployments in River State. There are concerns, as you can imagine, in Plateau State with Operation Safe Haven in the Northwest, and several other theaters of operation. Is that perhaps something to look at in terms of manpower? Because some of these daring attacks on military bases are telling a rather disturbing trend. I mean, it's one thing for them to attack defenseless communities. It's another thing for them to systematically attack military bases.
Well, when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, people are concerned about the number of conflicts across the Federation. And the truth is that I just made mention of the fact that encountering these efforts, encountering these security challenges, the kinetic aspect is insignificant compared to non-kinetics. And we have forgotten our time-tested conflict resolution mechanism. Every time we have this knee-jerk approach to security challenges without addressing the root causes of this. What brought about the insurgency? What brought about terrorism or banditry, as it were? Some of them are rooted into the issue of governance, as it were. So unless you address it, you keep on having this resurgence. And anytime you have security challenges, actually, take it or leave it, is failure of governance. And you just oppose.
We also said, General, that there are conflict merchants. There's the economic aspect of this chaos.
Of course.
So their motivation is to destabilize, regardless of whether there is good governance or not.
It might not necessarily to destabilize. The average person, take for instance, there were instances, especially during the fuel scarcity issue, a 5 liter of petrol that cost as much as 5,000, let's assume less than 5,000 in those days, at the filling station, even in Maiduguri. But by the time you take it to the insurgent, it costs thrice or twice higher. So to the average person who is supplying that to him, he has seen an opportunity to make brisk money. It's just like the issue of the NGOs that we're having that take up apartments for the next coming 10 years and what have you. And you know that to even higher, in fact, a lot of people bought golfs that in a month you get as much as 300,000 and what have you. And an average person who is getting that, somebody who has never seen 50,000 in his life, he won't mind what he used the golf for, so long as the 300,000 come into his pocket. So the motivation varies. Sometimes it is deliberate, just like you mentioned, but others is just to make brisk money. But in most instances, they are even ignorance of the consequences of their actions, or inaction, as the case may be. And that is where security enlightenment or education is very important. People tend to look at, and just like I was talking to one of the commanders, I said the problem with Nigeria is that the farther away you move from the epicenter of the insurgency, the farther away you are detached to the problem. And you go out of, in fact, we go out of the northern part of the country. When you talk about terrorism, they say it's your problem. But I can rest assure you, any problem in any part of this country has a corresponding impact on other parts of the country, either economically or even security-wise. We have seen it. Several instances. We are not even talking about reprisal attacks and what have you, but it has corresponding effects on, take for instance, humanitarian problems, food security, and so on and so forth. So, and that is why when you are dealing with security challenges, you have to have a harmonized and common front so that everybody will be on the same page. You don't politicize security issues. Everybody has a role to play, and the earlier you conscientize him or her, as the case may be, the better. And of course, we know, given the vastness and the terrain and all the rest of the thing, of course, we need more. But on the ground, human resources is grossly inadequate. We need to have more compared to what have you. But again, at the same time, you have to be addressing other things. If you look at it in the whole, the bulk of these security challenges emanated from the neglect of our policing system in this country. And unless you address such issues, you continue to be moving in the same vicious cycle.
Okay. I mean, you have served as the face of the Nigerian army in the past before. Let me get your assessment of the current communication strategy, because one would say it leaves much to be desired if a governor could come out and make some of those damning allegations or submissions, especially with some of the service, the security heads in Borno State in attendance for that security meeting. There are some who believe that we are not being told the full story. How does this usually work? Is there a management of the information about what the public is meant to understand? Are we being told half-truths so that we don't panic? What do you make of the current communication strategy that has been applied here?
And unfortunately, I will disappoint you in answering this question, because definitely I am studying for a PhD, and the title of my study is the communication strategy. So sincerely speaking, I don't think I should answer this question. But that notwithstanding, it is very important to communicate strategically and inform the component of the society what is being done, and so that they also have a greater sense of belonging and participate. And so much as I don't want to preempt all these things, but I know period to 2015 there about when we came up with a new communication strategy, the story was different. I have made reference to the fact that you dare not mention Boko Haram in Borno, neither can you mention Shekau. But when we came on board, we decided to tell the world what they are, pure criminals and their motivation. And of course, the consequences. Some of us paid, they put a price on our heads and all the rest. But the most important thing was the end result. Nigerians were better off with it. And I think these are issues that had to be taken into consideration and enhance it. And in any case, this is not the first time we have had instances. Even his predecessors, you remember, the issue of lack of equipment and what have you, back and forth and all the rest. So it's understanding they are normal things. Even among the military, sometimes people tend to not to understand things the way they are because of the information available to them.
So can two opposing things be true at the same time, as the case may be right now, where the Borno State government through the governor is raising an alarm, we're losing ground to Boko Haram terrorists, and on the other hand you have the NSA, you have the Minister of Information, you have the Defense Headquarters saying, listen, we're gaining a lot of ground, we've recorded so much in terms of counterterrorism, counter-banditry operations and things like that. How do you situate both the good and the bad to really get a full picture of the situation so that Nigerians do not necessarily feel as if they have to pick and choose between who is telling them the truth or who is lying to them?
I think you people are blowing things out of proportion, and I know that Trust TV has a correspondent in the Northeast, in Borno, and all the rest of them. And these are the people that you should ask questions whether what is happening on the ground.
There is a lot of apprehension. I mean, we've spoken to our correspondents about that.
Let me tell you, I will tell you a story. Sometimes, when I was Director of Army Public Relations, there was a front page story. I can't remember precisely the newspaper. And the bottom line was that 2 soldiers went on a war from their place of work. They went to Yola, capital of Adamawa State, and they went to NUJ. For whatever reason, they started talking. Just two out of the over 10,000 officers and soldiers that were deployed, not just that of the Nigerian Army, but the armed forces, of course, other, paramilitary agencies. But the next thing was a front page story. All is not well in the theater. That the soldiers have not been paid and all the rest. Personally, I have gotten a countless number of phone calls. In fact, as close as Kano, people were telling me that, look, Usman, if this story is true, we are relocating from Kano to move to Lagos and all the rest. Talk less of those in Borno and other parts of the northeast. But the bottom line is that it was just an isolated case. So sometimes when you are talking about all these things, you have to put it in a proper context. And that is why I say sometimes you blow things out of proportion. I think the most important thing, just like I said earlier on, if there are issues of this nature, is to properly investigate it and see how best to understand what is the problem and how do you go about mitigating it. There is no doubt about the fact that we have gained tremendously in the fight against terrorism and insurgency and other theaters. But that notwithstanding, naturally, everybody has every right to be indignant in respect of when you told that something is over and suddenly you have this attacks and you think that it is not over. But I think we ought to program the Nigerian society to understand in fighting terrorism and insurgency, we have to improve, the security education. We have to also equip, but beyond that, understand that terrorists, they are always very resilient. Most when you look at their motivation, it is not about material acquisition. It is about belief. So you have to understand, to an average person, to him, he is doing the work of God, and he will never stop. And you have seen it not just even terrorists, but even those extremist groups. There were instances people, they will go to ridiculous extent to do things. So now with the alliance with ISIS, even they will be under pressure by, their international counterparts that we have not had anything. So they have to do something there. So these are the issues. But then again, you should be careful so that you not fall into their hands. You understand? To be part of either giving them information or giving them logistics support or even encouraging them through moral support and what have you. So these are the issues that we will look at. So I think each and every one of us has a role to play, and blowing things out of proportion. And I told you, I don't even speak for the military, but I know that deep underground, a lot is being done for them to have said what they have said. And I think the most important thing is to reassure the people that something is being done. And of course, I must commend the governor for, being so outspoken to say so. But at the same time, the people, even themselves, they were also taken aback because they see him every day, almost every day, and all the rest of the thing. But these are some of the things when you are dealing with security situation. In fact, not just security situation, when you have group assignments and social in school, the perspective differ. And sometimes you have heated arguments. Even today, I have had instances when people have done, they were about submitting the report somewhere, somebody came out, he was talking about references and all the rest, because the perspective differ. But I think the most important thing is to always have, constructive engagement of all the components, with all the components that are involved. Yeah. And so we will not get to where we are now.
But can we all agree that the situation is serious enough that we need to have a second look at what's going on based on the governor's submissions?
Either with or without the governor, fighting insurgency is a serious business. Life were involved. So when you talk and when you think of the primary responsibility of government is what? Safety and security, right? So, and the welfare of the people. So by the time a Nigerian is losing his life or is uncomfortable, it's more than serious enough.
Okay, let's talk about the moral standpoint, right? What message should be going to the public right now, especially when it's apparent that Maiduguri and Abuja are not on the same page about what is actually happening on the ground? From a moral standpoint, what message should be going to the public? What sort of message are we sending to our troops?
Whose moral rights? am I big enough to be on the moral
I'm saying, I mean, as
so
someone who has handled communications, right? What sort of message should the public be consuming?
I have just told you now that things do happen. Tempers flies up because of the circumstances, and I think it's something that we don't need it to be escalated beyond what it is, as it were. And I can rest assure you, as we are seated now, there are ongoing consultation and constructive engagements and briefings. So it is not the way it is being blown. And I just told you that the governor has every right to complain about what is happening in his state, because I know he so much wants to have more progress and all the rest of the thing. It can give you, what do you call it? In fact, I will look at it also like some part of the Northwest. You know, there are developments, the security has improved. But I can rest assured, in most instances, people are still relapsing, not knowing that these people, in the first place, they are not going to stop until you stop them. So basically, that is it. So we also have to critically look at it. What are the roles of the Nigerian society or components of the society? Possibly somewhere too, there are things that we need to do better, not just necessarily the security forces. So I hope you understand. So each and every one of us has a role to play. So it is no question of being moral or immoral, what have you. Like I told you, you don't fight insurgency or any security challenges with a divided house. So people need to understand each other, to be on the same page, so that those that are risking their lives are getting the necessary support so that they can continue to risk their life. Nigeria will be better off for it. Basically, that is it.
So you don't have concerns that this public disagreement between the state government and the federal government is going to cause
It is you, Ahmed, that is showing that there is public disagreement.
Well,
I can assure you, they are making phone calls among themselves, right, and they are talking about other issues, including the one that you have just said. It is not the way you think it is.
Okay.
I have assurance and I know.
Okay, maybe you're privy to a lot of information, I guess, but from the way it looks aesthetically, it doesn't look good. But let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the broader challenge that the region entirely has been facing. The alliance of the Sahelian states has, in a way, changed the dynamics of our approach, even though there are still some collaborations. We've seen Burkina Faso over the past couple of weeks deal with the JNIM group attacking several parts of the country. Nigeria is handling quite a lot in terms of security-wise. What is your understanding of how this breakaway from ECOWAS is likely going to impact the operations of the multinational joint task force, in terms of coordination especially, because you did talk about how these cross-border activities of insurgents who have alliances with ISIS and all the other terror groups on the continent is further bolstering their operations?
I think, this development is not good for, not just for ECOWAS, it is also not good for all the breakaway people, because if you look at it, even when they were intact, it was difficult to contend with this terrorist group because of the alliances and the vested interests. More or less now you are isolated, only three. And of course you have the Western countries, those that were giving support, they are withdrawing their support, so you can understand. So there are kind of porous, or gaps within. And I think the best thing is to ensure that the relationship is maintained regardless of how they feel. But I know it's just a matter of time. They will definitely come back to their senses, because in fact they are suffering more. They are suffering more. Look at the relationship between Mali and Algeria now. And look at what is happening in Burkina Faso. It is not just Burkina Faso. Benin Republic, that used to be relatively peaceful, they have had attacks recently in the northern part of the country. So you can see with this kind of divided house the impact that it has. And you remember the Lake Chad region, even though Benin Republic is not part of the Lake Chad region, was also contributing to the multinational joint task force. Now, what sort of message are you sending and all the rest of the thing? And these are the issues that I think we need to talk to them, or we need to have constructive engagement. And I'm so happy when the Chief of Defense Staff embarked on diplomatic shuttle, and just recently they have the committee of the Chiefs of Defense Staff, they consider certain things and all the rest. I think we should, beyond the military alliances and all the rest of the thing, I think the other components needs to up their game to ensure that these people are constructively engaged. Let them go with their Sahelim, but let us have, collective effort in dealing with these security challenges. Because at initial stage, it was this nonchalant attitude. You are our neighboring countries, they don't care. Not till when the then president embarked on diplomatic shuttle, reorganize, recalibrate the multinational joint task force, they saw reason. And of course, there was semblance. Of course, there was, improved peace and security, not just in Nigeria, but other countries. So they know it. They cannot do it alone. So this ego trip and all the rest need to be jettisoned. Let us have.
You think it's ego trip? They're talking about emancipating themselves from France.
Well, they have emancipated themselves from France. What of Russia? What of the executive overcomers and Wagner Group? What are they doing?
I mean, you do know that they have right to self-determination. So they
naturally, but you go to Central Africa and see what is happening to their mining industry. So these are the issues. And in any case, there is a limit to which you can do propaganda and what have you. Have they been able to pay their civil servant and other workers? What is the level of social, economic well-being of those people in that country? So these are the things. We need each other. So much as we need them, they also need us. More than, in fact, they need us more than we need them.
So do you worry that we could solve domestically some of the security challenges that we're dealing with, but because our neighbors are still struggling with it, it could still trickle down, and that ripple could still compound the problem that we're dealing with?
I will give you an example. I don't know where you live, but I can rest assure you with if there is a power outage and you decide to own your generating set or your solar, you become so apprehensive if your neighbors do not have. So invariably, if we are thinking that we can solve the problem without their support, we are making a mistake, because at the end of the day, their problem will be so excruciating that they will come here as refugees. How do you contend with that? And in any case, they will lack the capacity to, secure their own end of the borders. We still, we have over 1,800 or so kilometers or thereabouts of porous borders with some of these countries. So how do you pretend that? So these are the issues. So much as you think of us doing what we can do, we also need their support. We need their cooperation so much as they need ours. So it's a collective responsibility. And more so, there are historical and cultural and religious affiliations with these people. And in any case, if you don't, even if you ensure that your border communities are, well taken care of, which is hardly the case, because we have had instances, especially the border communities, traditional rulers, smugglers and other criminal elements who are sponsoring some of their activities. So where their loyalty lies. And even apart from that issue of revenue, we have seen it in other countries like Ghana and Togo. You have somebody who has two wives. One, the other one is in Togo, the other one is in Ghana. So they have problems, about taxation and other issues. So it's something that we really have to look at critically and what have you. Okay. So we need them so much as they need us. I think they need us more, because Nigeria has everything it takes. And in any case, look at the funding of multinational joint task force. Look at the funding of ECOWAS. Where is it coming from?
Some would say the reason why we have to care more is because we have more to lose, more mouths to feed. And of course, our potential means that we are the one with the resources to be able to, as you're alluding to right now, in terms of resources, funding some of these operations. But zooming back into some of the domestic challenges that we're witnessing right now, over the past couple of days, we've seen the NSA coordinate the release of kidnapped persons back into the community, and also his message around discouraging people to pay ransom when their loved ones are kidnapped. Give me a sense of how far we've come in addressing some of these reverberating issues around banditry and kidnapping for ransom, especially considering some of those gains that have been made so far. Former Director General of the NYC recently made it back home after spending some 56 days in captivity. The details are quite harrowing, but it does look like we have to take the good and the bad at the same time. That the bad being that, this banditry is continuing, the good being that we're still witnessing some improvement in terms of rescue operations and things like that. How do you situate it, especially considering the fact that we're going into the rainy season farming cycle and there is some apprehension, especially among agrarian communities, about what may happen?
I think the issue is that first and foremost we would like to thank everybody that has contributed, in dealing with the security challenges as we are experiencing. Yes, there are concerns because, in fact, in some part of where I came from, just recently, a particular community was taxed to, tax themselves to raise 20 million naira, otherwise they will not farm and the rest of the thing. But that notwithstanding, we have seen tremendous improvement in terms of security, and that is why I made reference to the fact that some people tend to relax, but they don't relax because these people will not stop until you stop them. So what do you do to stop them? Yes, going back to what you have said in respect of the issue of ransom, we have said this time and time, the best recipe against kidnapping, the antidote, is refusal to pay ransom. Had it been that we are serious about it and we implement it just like he said, how many people will they kill? So, but now it has become a way of life, so to speak. It's an industry. You remember here, myself, you, and Kabiru Adamu, we discussed this issue about, booming economic system surrounding the banditry and the kidnapping issue. So, but I think the most important thing is to address the root causes. And fundamentally, yes, there are issues. How do you go about it? Kinetic is doing, aspect. We are recording progress, but we could expedite it if we enhance our non-kinetic. We have seen instances like that. But the most important thing is that I think we are not touching the right thing. These people that are involved in kidnapping and banditry, they are not spirits. They are human beings just like you and I. And of course, the feelers we have, many of them want to renounce it, but they want to get assurance. But the most important thing...
Like an amnesty program?
Well, that was why I wrote an article cautioning, yes, whether we like it or not, we have to, think of dialogue. But the terms and conditions of dialogue, and then I can understand the position of some of the state governors. Yes, they do not say they will not dialogue, but it has to be on the terms that are agreeable to all. One, people who are perpetrating this criminal and dastardly acts have to appreciate the fact, understand that they are committing crime against the society. Because every component of Nigerian society is aggrieved. It's aggrieved. So we need to talk to ourselves. Let us meet. Look at what happened in Rwanda. Over 1 million precious lives were lost. But today, Rwanda is a united country. In fact, you will embarrass them if you talk about those extraneous variables about religion or ethnicity. So we can do it. Yes, of course, people will think that it's relatively a smaller country and all the rest. But what of other countries? How do they manage their diversity? Now, coming back to this issue, I think we need to engage them. Those of them that show remorse and genuinely want to, down their arm, they should come. Okay. And we put them through a process, and that will be. But then again, there is one important thing that we have been missing. There are certain components of Nigerian society they are not talking, and I can rest assure you, by the time they come out and denounce this criminal act, most of them they will ground their arms and, of course, embrace peace. But unless we do so, they will not stop because most of them they are even ignorant of what they are doing, and unfortunately most of them they are not even so well educated even in Islamic religion, so they don't even know how to pray. All they are after is worldly things, and unless somebody talk to them in a manner they will understand that what they are doing is wrong. And of course, anyway.
Right. I can understand sometimes some things are better left unsaid. Yeah. Brigadier General Kuka Shekari, thank you so much, as always, for the insightful conversation. I appreciate you for the analysis. Thank you for stopping by tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. We do appreciate you for your time and company. Daily Politics returns tomorrow live at 8 p.m. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Good evening.